brush versus roller, which one's going to give us the nicest finish on trims? I really want to know the answer to this question. The next thing we'll look at, the cheapest paint that I found at the Home Depot was the Glidden Premium. I think it was like 20 bucks versus Benjamin Moore Advance, over $40. A lot of people out on the old interwebs and painters swear by this stuff. Is there even any kind of a difference between these two paints? We will figure that out. And then finally, we're gonna have a look at the magic bullet of Floetrol. Is this stuff a load of crap or does it actually work? Now to figure out brush versus roller, I got 3 samples here. I used the cheap paint because that is going to highlight the differences. For the brush, I've got the Worcester Silver Tip. This is kind of your cheapest, best option for trim paint. You can get these for about $10. I will link them in the description. They're nice and soft, they got good density, they clean up well. Now for the rollers, I've got the foam roller and a 1/4 inch nap roller. For the samples here, this is just a windowsill that I sanded down with an orbital sander so it was perfectly flat. This is gonna let us know what this paint is gonna look like in a trim situation. If we look at the brush here, I did 2 coats with the cheap paint, with the brush. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's about a 3.5. It doesn't feel great, it doesn't look great. You can definitely detect ridges from all over the place. And yeah, not super impressed with the brush. If we look at the rollers, the foam roller here did actually quite a nice job. Scale of 1 to 10, I'm gonna give this about a 7. The mistake that I made here is I put the paint on and there was all kinds of air bubbles. I thought the air bubbles would pop. They did not. Later on, figured out what you want to do, put the paint on, take the foam roller with a little bit less paint on it, and just as lightly and gently as you can, roll it along and pop the bubbles. You will get a much nicer finish. For all the samples here, I did sand the front half in between coats to see if there was a difference. The difference is really just textural. It's quite a bit smoother when you sand in between coats, so you don't necessarily have to, but it's probably not the worst idea. So with this foam roller, definitely not a bad finish. The orange peel is pretty small and tight and it looks good. Moving over to this 1/4 inch nap roller, this was horrendous. I do not recommend using this particular roller. It's the Worcester Red Feather 1/4 inch nap roller. It was recommended to me. The thing that is really terrible about it is it swerves all over the place with wet paint. If you try to roll this thing straight, it just smears paint. You can see here I've washed this about 6 times and it's already starting to come apart. The fabric is on an angle here and this thing does not want to roll straight. The finish on here is pretty heavy and orange peely. It looks like a kind of a poorly painted wall. So for the cheap paint, the foam roller definitely outperforms the brush. You just have to remember to pop those air bubbles with that light pass. So for any trim work that you'd be doing, you'd want to do as many of the flat surfaces with the foam roller, using the brush sparingly for any kind of profiles or edges. Now let's talk about the ultra expensive Benjamin Moore Advance versus the cheap Glidden paint. There was dead bodies in this battle. This was an absolute beatdown. So probably the biggest difference between these two paints is the texture and feel of the finish. With the cheap stuff, it feels like 400 grit sandpaper. With the Benjamin Moore Advance, it feels like a cabinet smooth finish. The difference is pretty startling in real life here. If we look at the quality of the finish here, with the brush on both of the samples, the Advance is just gonna smooth out and get glass-like. This is just textural and brushy looking. The finish with the Advance and the brush, 2 coats, is pretty insane actually, how nicely it's leveled out. You could definitely get by with brushing big chunks of flat trim, and it's quite a nice product. With the foam roller here, if we look at the 2 different samples, again, the texture is stark and the finish is quite a bit nicer with the Advance. So if you're going to be painting trims at your house, I would recommend this Benjamin Moore Advance. The other paint that a lot of painters recommend is a Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane. It's probably not going to level out quite as nice as the Benjamin Moore Advance, but it's going to dry a little quicker and it might be a little bit easier to work with. Going forward, I am going to be sticking with the advanced, or maybe not. Let's have a quick look at what happens when you put the Floetrol into the cheap paint. This is supposed to eliminate brush and roller marks. So the Floetrol definitely does make the cheaper paint a little bit better. If you look at this door sample down here, it's a little less orange peel, but to be honest with you, the brushed area is horrific. But if you look at the Benjamin Moore advanced samples here, the Floetrol doesn't even really get close. And now I've gotten good results here with the foam roller and the brush with the Benjamin Moore advanced, but it does beg the question, what would happen if a complete knucklehead tried to use a cheap paint sprayer for the very first time to paint a door and the trims? It could turn out really, really bad. If you want to see what's going to happen there, think about subscribing to the channel. If we're in the future and the video's already made, it's going to be right over here. This stuff is supposed to eliminate. If we look at the brush set, now when it comes to painting trims, what is going to give you too excited? Now, painting trims. Yeah. Nope.